Welcome to the Good Friday reflection with me, Beth Carroll. I am here working with Jack this week for Holy Week as we reflect on Fulton Sheen's work, The Life of Christ, deepening our Holy Week through uh, who is going to be canonized very soon, Fulton Sheen, his beautiful work. And he has such a way with words. So I'm going to reflect on just a little bit of this and also share some of my own personal story. But just to say right up front here, where are you at in the crucifixion scene right now in your own life? Having to give your own yes to that particular cross that God is allowing for you or directly willing for you, that is not something that is movable, that is necessarily that cross that you have no choice but to accept. And I think it can just be so good to think of Sheen's words here. He says, there is no love ever mounts to a higher level without death to a lower one. And so when we're thinking about this, the way that Sheen unpacks it for us, his reflection here is based on the third word. And it's the third time that Jesus uses the word woman as he addresses or speaks about his mom. So the first time being the Garden of Eden, when Eve fell. God said, I will put enmity between you, speaking to the enemy, and the woman. And we know now that Jesus is the new Adam and that Mary is the new Eve. But the second time that he uses the word woman in addressing Mary marked a whole new time of pain, um, another time of Mary's heart being pierced at the wedding at Cana, that there was an understanding between them, between Jesus and Mary, that this was going to be the end of the 30 years of being mother and son together, and that this would mark the beginning of the proclamation of the kingdom. Essentially, when, as she puts it, Jesus is taking the water of sin and making wine out of it, that ultimately now the wine will become blood. And Mary is cooperating with that as she notices that they are out of wine. And Jesus responds, woman, what does this have to do with me? They know what's about to happen. So the pain that was in Mary's heart that night, you think about the celebration going on around her, people enjoying this wine that was the finest wine that they had ever tasted. They saved the best wine for the end of the party, right? And Mary quietly holding all of these things in her heart. Now she stands at the foot of the cross, and Jesus says, woman, behold your son. John representing all of us, all of mankind, that she would now be giving another yes to, um, in her role, cooperating with our Lord's plan for redemption. And so, as I think back to my own journey and struggles and times where I have noticed that I had to give a yes necessarily, there was a time, December of 2021. It was the day after Christmas, and I was praying for my mother-in-law who was estranged from our family at the time. Not necessarily only through her fault, or it's all of our faults, my fault. But we were estranged and we missed her that Christmas. And my heart felt broken, that she was not with us. And so I was praying the rosary. I was praying the fifth sorrowful mystery, the crucifixion. And I received an actual a piercing in my heart that was so deep and real that it actually brought me to my knees. And I'm thinking about, in reflecting upon this, that Mary was telling me that I knew that that was her relating with me, like, yes, your heart will be pierced too, and I'll be with you. I felt that reality, but I didn't yet know what that meant. It seemed like only a miracle would be able to bring my mother-in-law back into our lives. But a year later, almost exactly a year later, I knew that it was actually in part to prepare my heart for the worst tragedy that I had ever endured, which was the death of my son. I was actually somewhat surprised that my mother-in-law came for his funeral. She made haste to come be with us, because sometimes when pain and estrangement gets so difficult, it almost becomes easier to just stay isolated and stay in our own pain. And so she did come to be with our family after the loss of my son, and she ended up deciding to stay, and she now lives, a mere few blocks away from my home, and is back with us in relationship. And that couldn't have been done through our own efforts. It only was done through a shattering reality of grief in our lives. So it was in one lane, a complete horror that my son had died. In another lane, God is still yet drawing infinite good from what looks like death and evil, just like when we killed God. Um, so we all have our own part to play in redemptive suffering. And not long after my mother-in-law moved back here, her son died a tragic death. And we were able to be together as a family and support her and support each other through that. So here we are at the foot of the cross on this Good Friday, knowing that sometimes those small deaths that Sheen describes, a lower death, will mount us to a higher level of love. And there is that mystery that remains. But where are you with your suffering and your fiat today? And what might be an unnecessary cross that you're carrying that our Lord is inviting you to put down? And sometimes that looks like fear and control. And yeah, so we can't do it alone. And with grace, we can do hard things.